I've been reading so much, more than I've ever read in my entire life, and I've gained so much knowledge, and books are cool, man. That's all I'm gonna say about that. And today I just thought it would be fun to talk about my 8 favorite nonfiction books that I've read recently, like within the past year, and let's get started. How to Change Your Mind: What the New Science of Psychedelics Teaches Us About Consciousness, Dying, Addiction, Depression, and Transcendence by Michael Pollan. I've really enjoyed reading this book. It's super interesting, and it's all about the history of different psychedelic drugs and how they've been dealt with throughout the years. One thing that I've learned is that psychedelics can have a very positive impact on your life, whether it is because they help you recover from alcoholism, they help you find your purpose in life, they help you feel the meaning of your life and help you accept yourself. And I know these things sound very mystical, but the way that the book breaks them down is super interesting, and as a psychedelics enthusiast myself, it was super encouraging. That's all I'll say. There are some negative impacts, like if you have different genetic predispositions to psychological issues, having psychedelics can bring out that psychosis, if that makes sense. So definitely use at your own risk and be careful. Another super interesting thing I loved reading about was the stoned ape theory, which theorizes that we made the jump from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens by having psychedelic mushrooms. That's such a fun theory. There's absolutely no way to prove it, but it makes sense when you think about it, because mushroom systems are up to 2 miles long. That's 2 entire miles of interconnectivity and I guess a consciousness in themselves. So the theory is that when we had them, it opened up that same kind of consciousness in our minds. And it brings up the question of like, is consciousness something that is in each of our brains individually, or is it a web outside of ourselves that we just kind of learn to tune into? I'll leave you with this quote that I really liked from the book. Mystical states seem to those who experience them to be also states of knowledge. They are illuminations, revelations, full of significance and importance, and as a rule, they carry with them a curious sense of authority. The Quest for Cosmic Justice by Thomas Sowell. It delves deeper into the idea of social justice and what exactly that means, and all of the intricacies that go into crafting this idea of social justice. The main thing that he argues is for equality of opportunity and not equality of outcome. And unfortunately, our views today of social justice are equality of outcome. And this is an ideal universe, an ideal version of history that unfortunately is never going to happen. This is a hard book to talk about because I feel like its contents can be or feel very polarizing. And even though I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, I think it's a point of view that brings a lot of value to the conversation of social justice. I'll leave you with this quote. The challenge of determining the net balance of numerous windfall advantages and disadvantages for one individual at one given time is sufficiently daunting. To attempt the same for whole, broad brush categories of people, each in differing stages of their individual life cycles in a complex and changing society, suggests hubris. And I know people might find this topic sensitive, but I still think it's very important to look at the coin from 2 different sides, even if you don't agree with it. The Power of Habit by Charles DuHigg. This is a book that I go on and on about all the time. There are so many cool and freaky examples in this book about our habits and how they are exploited by advertising companies and by different organizations and stuff like that. But it also talks deeply about our relationship to habits. One of the main things that I learned is about the basal ganglia and its effects on habit forming. So the basal ganglia is this part in our brains that turns things that we do every day into habits. Your brain can't differentiate between good habits and bad habits. Anything that touches its basal ganglia, it will try to turn into a habit for the sake of survival and saving up its energy for other things. So I think by learning more about how habits are formed, it's easier for me to derail myself from bad habits and pick up good habits, because you know a little bit more about your brain and how it absorbs the information that you give it in everyday life. Another thing that I learned about in this book is how much our habits are exploited by companies. So they had a very interesting story about this father who sued Target for giving his daughter subliminal messaging, pretty much by giving her advertisements that were baby related. She was a very young girl and she was getting a lot of like pregnancy related things like baby cribs and like diapers, whatever it may be, and he was pissed. He was like, why would you be showing this to my daughter? Like, this is not cool. Turns out the daughter was pregnant and he lost the case. Target's algorithm is so on point that they can determine if you're pregnant based on the things that you're buying. Things like lotion, apparently that's the thing, that if you buy a lot of lotion, that indicates them that you're pregnant, and they were right. So their goal with this whole system of algorithms is, how do we shove things at you that we know about you without you knowing that we know? Does that make sense? It is completely insane. This is why I think privacy is so important, and that there should be a line between advertising and your personal information, but that's a whole other topic. I would highly recommend The Power of Habit. I felt so empowered after reading it, and highly recommend it to everyone. Super easy read, very informative.
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Mason.
This book is all about, just like it sounds like, learning how not to give a shit about what others think about you. One of my main takeaways from this book is his ideas of fault versus responsibility. So fault lies in the past, whereas responsibility lies in the present. And the idea that we are responsible for the metrics that we use to give value to the things we do. When you see a fault in the past, you automatically look at it through a certain metric of why that was a fault in the past. But you can always update the way that you see those things and reshape how you are responsible for your now. The next thing that I loved about this book is it talked about pain and how you will face pain in your life, because life is suffering in a way. But the question he poses is, what kind of pain do you want in your life? It's just super empowering when you read about the success of others and how they were able to achieve it. And I think it's empowering to know that you're not alone and that you can choose what pain you want to suffer. And I'll leave you with a quote by Mark Twain that says, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who loves it fully is prepared to die at any time. What are you willing to struggle for?"
Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon.
But really, this is 3 books in one because it is an audio trilogy, and all 3 books are super great, really easy reads. I actually have Show Your Work, which is the second one in the series. It's super short. I think it has a lot of valuable lessons for people. And if you're going through a creative slump or you just need a little bit of inspiration, I would highly recommend all 3 books. There are 2 main things that I've learned from this series. One, it's that creativity isn't something nebulous that happens in your mind in sparks of time. Creativity is a process in which you consciously put ideas together and elaborate and develop them. It is, in a sense, a way of operating, and by changing your perception of creativity, I think it's easier to be creative. You are a creative being. All you have to do is go out there and look at the world, experience, and bring those ideas home. Another thing that has been super influential is his idea that we should commit to learn in front of others. I think that's a beautiful idea, just showing your work and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable to show everything. No idea what the fuck I'm doing, but I'm committing to learn the ropes in front of others. And if there's something that you want to do, go for it. Commit to learn that thing in front of others, whether it is photography or videography or writing, anything really. The quote that I leave you with from this book is, "If people think I'm an idiot, I don't care."
Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth.
I have talked about in on my previous videos, but I did want to sneak it in here one more time because there's so much more I can say about it. One of the things she talks about is how talent and effort equals skills, and skills times effort equal achievement. Grit is so important because grit is your ability to tell yourself that you can do hard things. You can do hard things. You have the capacity to do those difficult things and overcome them, and that's how you get achievement. You don't have to be super talented or super skilled. It's the deliberate practice of the things that you want to follow that get you to achieve your dreams. The second thing that I learned is take your lack of talent seriously. I taught myself how to juggle when I was very young. I would put Beanie Babies against a wall and practiced on the wall, but that wasn't really juggling until I started working at Barnes & Noble, and they had a juggling kit, and I bought it and I taught myself how to actually juggle. I know it's not the same thing because it's not as influential as other types of talents that you could develop, but still I feel like all these years later I took my lack of talent at juggling seriously, and I'm actually a pretty sick juggler now, so watch out.
The Craft of Research, 4th edition.
It's a textbook on research, and I wanted to read this to really level up my base skills of research because I just love doing that for fun, so I thought why not get a little bit more formal with how I do it. There are 2 important things that I learned from this book. One is to write as you research, because as you're researching, all of these different thoughts and connections are coming into your mind, and it does well to write those down because later on when you revisit the material, you might not have those same ideas still in your head, you might have forgotten them, and there goes pretty much part of the research goes away because you're lacking those connections that you had made earlier. So yeah, write as you research. The second thing that I've learned is citation indexing. And, I'm familiar with forward citation. So let's say show your work. Forward citation would be just going into the back, looking at the sources, picking one out, reading that. But backward citation is when you find what books quoted or cited this book, which is so cool because you could read newer developments on these thoughts, if that makes sense. Super cool. I don't know why I was never taught about that in school. Obviously forward citation, yes, but never learned about backward citation in school. And the last book that I want to talk about today is The Science of Storytelling by Will Storr. This book is a guide into writing out the human mind. Not only does it teach you stuff about yourself as a human being, but also how to better characterize other human beings, which is really cool. One thing that I learned in this book is the theory of minds, which pretty much says that we build models in our heads of what other people are thinking and feeling as a way to understand them. And sometimes our own instincts can be wrong, but we still have to do this in our minds in order to experience other perspectives. On the contrary, though, it's not always accurate, because according to this book, strangers can accurately tell what a person is thinking only 20% of the time, and lovers and friends can accurately tell what you're thinking only 35% of the time. You don't really know what people are going through and what people are thinking, and it's a good reminder to be compassionate and empathetic. And I really enjoyed that. There's a lot of things in this book that are really thought-provoking, but I loved the idea that truth is a group activity. You cannot have truth without freedom of speech and freedom of expression. You have to be able to break through to things that are difficult, talk and think about things that are difficult, and without having these conversations, we cannot arrive at a consensus of what the truth is. Just through the lens of like writing a character, but still, this is more of a psychological analysis of people and how to understand them better, and therefore how to write them better. So I just thought it was really interesting and highly recommend. And I'll leave you with this quote from this book. "A real work of art destroys, in the consciousness of the receiver, the separation between itself and the artist." And that's all 8 books. Thank you so much for watching, if you watched till the end. If you have any book recommendations, fiction, nonfiction, anything, please leave them down below. I'm always looking for another good book to read. Thank you so much again if you made it to the end. I really appreciate it. And have a nice day.